Well, I finally found an anime that I'm comfortable calling the worst one I've seen so far, and I haven't even finished it yet. In fact, I've only watched one episode, and I immediately just need to talk about this and go over some of it with you all. And it's one I'm sure you've heard of. It's called X-Arm. It was a Crunchyroll original from last year, and it is, by no exaggeration, the worst animation I've ever seen in my life. I would have rather watched this story on a stack of note cards that someone was flipping through like a flip book. The animation would have been smoother there than in this show. It's like a stick figure pivot animation half the time, but not nearly as good. I swear to God, the General Auto Insurance animated commercials look better than this entire show. I don't know what went wrong. I don't know what team they hired to do this. The same visionaries behind Food Fight? It blows my mind how unpleasant this thing is to look at. I got so offended, I looked into the team a little bit because I couldn't imagine an actual team put together this disaster, this fucking catastrophe. And it turns out there was only one person on the entire staff that worked on the show that had ever had any history in anime. Everyone else, this was their first foray into the medium. The main guy behind X-Arm was a live-action director, who wasn't exactly a great live-action director to begin with, but they hired him because they thought it would be interesting to have someone with no animation background work on this for some reason. They thought that since the last movie he did was like a martial arts movie, they thought he'd be a good choice for like action in the animated medium, which he wasn't at all, clearly. But anyway, I'd like to go over the first episode here.
In
An astute observer will notice that the main character's 3D, while the other characters are 2D, leading to this jarring disconnect immediately. Our main character is Akira, and just like a 62-year-old woman on Facebook, he doesn't like technology. He says his head spins and he feels like he's being sucked into it, which of course is foreshadowing, but it also just sounds straight out of Better Call Saul with Chuck, being worried about all the technology around him and shit. It's a really immediately goofy concept, made even sillier by the fact that, again, the main character is 3D, interacting, I'm putting that word in quotes and using it real loosely, with a 2D world around him and 2D characters. So it just doesn't work, and it's already just yucky. They can't even accidentally get something right in this show. The majority of the 2D components are just still images. It's basically like watching a Dr. Seuss book in a PowerPoint presentation. It's trash, but the 2D stuff isn't even like well made. Like there's no effort there. Like they have no excuse because this isn't even animated and still looks like trash. Because that girl looks like she's sitting on an invisible bar stool, and the three dudes around her also look like the most low-effort thing imaginable. They could have taken at least a little bit more than 6 minutes to make this, because it stays on screen for long enough to realize how awful it looks. So after a conversation with his brother, it's mentioned that he works on androids, and then he goes out into public and immediately witnesses a crime. These hooligans over here are tugging on a girl's arm, and they're talking about walking her home, and Akira has an internal conflict wondering if he should try and help her. Even though the odds are stacked against him and he's not much of a fighter, he knows he won't win here, but he wants to try his best to save that girl. He gets hit by a truck. Yeah, he just gets absolutely fucking walloped there. That truck had it out for him. That was sent by God himself. He had just started crossing the street, and the second he turns around, there's all of a sudden a truck just barreling down the road at him. I'm not far enough into the show to know if this was like a time travel assassination plan or something. I really have no clue. But what a wacky intro. And that's a pretty cliche thing. I've seen that exact plot device used in many anime as well as many shows in general. Like about to do a good deed, but then you get hit by a truck. In Yu Yu Hakusho, it was he saved someone's life by pushing them out of the way of a bus and then getting hit. In this case, they do it the worst I've ever seen. Fast forward 16 years post truck blast, and we are now looking at an android and a police officer who are going through hell right now. And this android needs a hardware update or something. Like, there needs to be a patch to her aiming, because she doesn't hit a single shot. So what the fuck is the point of an android officer if they have the same level of accuracy as me shooting a gun with my eyes closed? But luckily she has martial arts to rely on. The edgier seat action just doesn't stop, but I wish it would, because it's disorienting and bad. This plays out almost exactly like a puppeteer with puppets making an action scene. It's so stiff and it's so clunky. It's like somehow this show has glitches in it. It's a goddamn anime that somehow has glitches and bugs. You'll see like a bunch of clipping and a lot of like janky like spaghettification effects occasionally during the action, because it feels like it was rendered using Unity version -0.1. Like, I don't know how you can even make a show that has bugs in it. It's not a fucking video game. They managed to secure the trunk, mission accomplished, and then we finally get Akira back, and we see what role he plays in this whole thing. I need to give a special shout out to the lip syncing department here, whoever worked on the faces in general. They are so unbelievably awful that I can't help but be impressed by the ineptitude. I have never seen faces this emotionless. And I'll show some other examples here. They only have 3 emotions. It's neutral, happy, and mad. And the way they express these is the positioning of the eyebrows, and that's it. There's 3 levels the eyebrows will end up at, and nothing else. And the lips only move up and down sometimes. It's so shockingly terrible. But anyway, Akira's back. He's now an X-Arm. He is what was in the trunk. He's an X-Arm unit now, which is a very sought-after piece of technology. I'll just fast forward through some of the filler here and fill you in that he can take control of Alma, the android, whenever he wants or whenever she invites him to, and it becomes a very useful tactic. This is the main villain of episode 1, and he's out here looking like he just escaped a lobotomy. He's got his mouth wide open like he's gasping for air like SpongeBob when he entered Sandy Cheek's dome with no water. So he's an X-Arm user, and he's terrifying. He's able to, like, dematerialize his body, kind of like what Obito was able to do in Naruto, where he's able to have things like pass through him, but then he can make himself solid when he wants. This scene's a great example of what I mean when it comes to emotion. So if you look at her face right now, that's how they portray anger on every character. They make them look like a goddamn Voltorb from Pokemon. They just tilt the eyebrows down, and it's like that's them being angry. Now the bad guys defeated our heroes temporarily, and he's got his little wiggle finger going into her abdomen talking about cutting out organs to sell. But luckily the heroes are coming back and about to save the day. God, the fights feel so empty. It's like they're fighting in a sensory deprivation tank. There's no sound effects other than yeah, oh, yeah, oh, and that's it. Nothing else. Sometimes they have like impact sound effects, but there's no like backing track. There's no ambient noise or anything. It's just this uncomfortable series of groans and clunky moves.
ですか？
昔から機械が苦手なんだ。中に吸い込まれそうな感じで。
やめろ、早く私の中に入って。
Pretty fucking epic scene here. So, Akira exists in this cyber dimension, the cyberspace, and he's able to control technology, so he, like, takes control of the ship and, like, moves it around ever so slightly. He jostles it. And then Alma gets defeated by the bad guy, and then she visits him in the cyber heaven and says that he needs to get inside of her, take control of her body to fight the bad guy, which he does, and then he beats the bad guy, and that's the end of the episode. Like, it's just not, it's not even worth showing you. It's just really fucking boring and bad. It's much worse than I expected. And what's the most insulting thing about it is there's 10 or 12 episodes. I think it's 12 actually. And that's a lot. Each one of them's 20 minutes. It's like, shit. That's a lot of dog shit to watch. But I'll do it because I'm still on the quest to find the worst anime ever made, and right now this is looking like it could be a front runner. I still think Skelter Heaven is worse, like objectively, but at least Skelter Heaven is only a single movie that's like 17 minutes long. Each of these episodes is longer than that whole movie, and they're really fucking trash. So, yeah, anyway, that's episode 1 of X-Arm. That's about it. See ya.